Hello, everybody. We are Nate Rage. And welcome to a new episode of Nostalgia Rewind. Hold on, I can't breathe in this. Let's talk about Spider-Man the animated series in the 90s. One of my favorite shows I grew up on, and probably one of yours. Let's go! Being born in '89, this was my Spider-Man. The comics and then later the Raimi films just cemented my love for him. And with Venom 2 and Spider-Man No Way Freaking Home coming out, I decided to take a look back at this awesome show and, well, see if it still holds up. I have a pretty damn good feeling it does.
See you there then.
Robbie, see if you can find Eddie Brock. He's supposed to have some big scoop for me, and Parker, your mouth's open.
Now, understandably, this show can be a little cheesy. But hey, it was made for kids. It's over 20 years old, for God's sake. But I digress. It's still awesome. Spectacular, if you will. And with this review, I think we should start with the soundtrack. It has one of the best intros of any cartoon. Speaking of which, it's a surprise fact time! Fun fact, Joe Perry of Aerosmith fame was a huge Spider-Man fan, and he made the intro to this show. And it rocks! So you know what? Yeah, let's crank it up! So many great memories of this show. I was so obsessed with it, I even had the toys.
It's only at the top. The wizard! He always has a tale to tell. Well, if it isn't Venom, a dentist's worst nightmare.
The cereal?
Good, honey. Spider-Man. Whoa. Spider-Man cereal. Cool.
New Spider-Man cereal. It's the action-packed part of your balanced breakfast. Sweet, crunchy webs crawling with marshmallows like Hobgoblin's Pumpkin Bomb and the Kingpin.
Hell, I am Nate the Raviolis.
Something new is shaking from Chef Boyardee, and kids everywhere are getting into it. New Spider-Man pasta. Whoa! Come on, let's show Mysterio the ropes, kids. Hello! Looks like he'll be hanging around for a while. Totally webbed out Spider-Man shape smothered in secret sauce. New Spider-Man pasta from Chef Boyardee. So hot, it's practically radioactive.
Alright, you waited long enough. Let's review this amazing show. Let's start with the animation. To me, it holds up pretty well, although sometimes you can tell when they skip the budget here and there. Like with the web swinging, and they reuse shots, well, quite a bit. But the action, they put a lot of special care into that. With the technology they had at the time, they did pretty damn good. And it's well choreographed too. As for the animation and detail of the characters, it's pretty flawless and accurate. Except for the fact, every damn dude in the show, especially Brock, seems to be on roids. Season 1 is mainly an introduction to the main cast and the main characters. We get a new villain almost every episode. Although at first glance it seems like a villain of the week show, it's far deeper than that. More accurately, it's a lot like the Lee and Ditko comics. The characters all have a motivation and a reason for the way that they are. Just like real people. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's just talk about how each season was approached for now. Like, I love how Season 1 is the most 90s out of the 5 seasons. Season 2 gets a lot worse to the cast, Peter especially. Season 3 is about father's good and evil. Season 4 is about partners, whether it be partners you work with or partners you're married to. Season 5 is Spider-Man teaming up with a lot of different superheroes and going through Avenger-type events, with only 2 stories dealing with the Peter Parker side of his life. Speaking of Peter Parker, This is a very accurate depiction of him from the comics. He's just a normal dude with normal problems. And the Spider-Man alter ego, well, that just adds more problems for him. And, well, they really suck. He's exactly how he is in the comics. He doubts himself. He has mopey moments. Moments when he doesn't even want his powers.
Keep a date because of you. Time to turn my life around.
And moments when he rages out in anger.
Back here, Shocker! Shocker!
He has shown off his intellect and problem-solving skills time and time again. He's extremely quippy when he's Spider-Man.
Truck for cover. I hope Ratman and Cockroach Man aren't already in here.
And has truly heroic moments. And this Peter Parker isn't exactly a teen like he is in the newest movies either. In fact, at the start of the series, he's already out of high school and he's in college. He's been Spider-Man for years at this point. Which a lot of Peter's life-changing moments did happen when he was in college in the comics. So I totally understand what they're doing here. As Spider-Man, he's usually seen as a menace to the city, especially J. Jonah Jameson, his boss from the Daily Bugle.
It'll be different between us now, huh?
No way. This doesn't change a thing between us. I still won't rest until you've been unmasked and eliminated.
Fair enough, Pickle Puss. And I won't rest until you shave that stupid mustache. So we're even.
But some know he's a hero doing the right thing. His rep is somewhere in the middle with the general public. And for some strange reason, he hasn't found any supervillains since, well, the start of the series. Like, are you seriously telling me he's only fought street thugs the last 3 or 4 years? That's like easy mode for Spidey.
That was easy.
Also, while this show does a good job adapting Peter, it does an even better job evolving him. Having him become a better man and hero by the end of the series. Now that I've gotten over talking about Spidey, I have a very extensive supporting cast to talk about. Up at the point in time the show is being developed, they had 3 decades of characters to work with. Like Flash Thompson, Felicia Hardy, Harry Osborn, Deborah Whitman, Michael Morbius, Kurt Connors and his wife Margaret Connors, his son Billy Connors, J. Jonah Jameson, his son John Jameson, Glory Grant, Robbie Robertson, Eddie Brock, Ned Lees, Norman Osborn, Rand Robertson, Madam Web, Anna Watson, Mary Jane Watson,
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot.
May Parker, and Ben Parker. Off the top of my head, that's the main supporting cast of the series. And of course, not counting all the supervillains and superheroes that pop up. This show really took advantage of the supporting cast, and utilized every character except for a select few. Like his first true love, Gwen Stacy, her father, George Stacy, his ex Betty Grant, and Jean DeWolf. George Stacy and Jean DeWolf were probably replaced by Lieutenant Terry Lee, who was a character created for this very show. She's an all-original character, and a decently developed one, too. My guess of who replaced Gwen Stacy in the show was partially Felicia Hardy, and the other is Mary Jane Watson. Think about it, blonde college girl that Peter is initially interested in. She's no science whiz, and she's rich. And for Mary Jane, took the place of Gwen Stacy in the storylines that were, well, meant for Gwen Stacy from the comics. We'll talk about them more later on. Let's mention Flash Thompson. While he doesn't really bully Peter in the show, he seems to still have it out for him. And despite being underutilized and not seen very much after Season 2, he seems to have a pretty good story arc still. Felicia Hardy is the rich daughter of the wealthy Anastasia Hardy. And I know what comic fans are thinking. That's not accurate at all. I know, but it is a pretty interesting take on her. She's not really like her comic book character counterpart till much later in the series. Even then, she still skips the antagonistic part of her relationship with Spider-Man. Well, except for when they first meet, of course.
My spider sense.
I knew you'd come, Spider.
Who are you?
Just a stray black cat.
And later on, like in the comics, she even tries to be his partner.
Done something special. Can't you feel it? that?
Oh, yeah.
I don't, but maybe I can help you get through this.
I ship them. Harry Osborn, his best buddy, is a lot like the comic version, not really seeing Peter as a good friend until they become roommates. He's actually a party boy that starts out as friends with Flash. Unlike the comic version, though, he doesn't experiment or use drugs of any kind. Except for the Goblin formula, of course. And he is just as tortured, pained, and sad as the comic version. The Connors are a very valuable ally to Spider-Man, and vice versa. Except when he turns into the Lizard, of course.
Strange. So strange. A week ago, this creature was a scientist. My teacher. My friend. He cared for me and wanted to help them just as I do. And now look at the both of us, fighting each other, fighting for our lives.
Needless to say, Kirk has a big role in the series, especially the second season. Now, J. Jonah, he's pretty much the exact copy of his comic book counterpart, with some changes here and there, of course. He wants to unmask Spidey because he thinks Spidey might be a menace to the city, which is a little different than his comic motivation, but still pretty good motivation. He was an investigative journalist himself back in the day. Although he does not like to admit it, he does like Peter and Robbie a lot. So much so, in fact, he's willing to vouch for them. He doesn't like to show it, but the dude's got a lot of heart. While Jonah thinks Spidey's a menace, Robbie thinks the opposite, and has seen the opposite. He knows Spider-Man is a hero. He's a straight arrow with a somewhat troubled past, growing up with his, well, frenemy, Tombstone. Anna Watson, MJ's aunt, well, she doesn't have much of a character arc in this series, besides, for some reason, hating Peter's guts. It's almost funny how much shit she talks. Here, watch this.
Going to be the ruination of that poor woman.
Hush! Maybe that's him now. Get down there! Peter's probably in the thick of all this.
You can't put your life in danger just because of Peter's disregard for his own safety. Woman, I never did trust Peter. Always gone when May needed him. That boy is so self-centered and uncaring.
The big fat bitch, she's the biggest bitch in the whole wide world. He's a stupid bitch, and everyone's a bitch, she's a bitch to all the boys and girls.
Seriously though, what the shit did he do to deserve that? Aunt May, on the other hand, is Peter's motherly figure. She's shown time and time again how much she loves and cares about Peter with her selfless acts and sacrifices. Unfortunately though, she's also very scared of Spider-Man and thinks he's a criminal.
I'm the hero, remember?
She's also the one that set up a blind date between Peter and MJ. Mary Jane Watson is interested in Peter since the very beginning, pretty much love at first sight. And she doesn't necessarily act like the carefree party girl like she is in the comics, but she does retain some of those elements, along with wanting to be a model and an actress. Her backstory is pretty much the same, with having a estranged relationship with her abusive father. Also in this version, Hydra Man is a very creepy and possessive ex-boyfriend that she had back in high school. It's not in the comics, but I'm okay with some changes, as long as it's a good idea that I can get behind. Now let's talk about the writing of the show. Like a lot of shows back in the 90s, they were trying to go with a somewhat mature tone sometimes. Or as head writer John Sepper Jr. called it, the half-hour drama. Quite a bit can actually happen in just one episode with a handful of characters being introduced in a single episode. A villain with a good motivation, action, drama, and character development, and laughs, all being juggled into a half-hour show. They really did do a good job balancing out each episode. And if it was a multi-part arc, they always get you with those unforgettable cliffhangers. It always stressed me out a little bit as a kid, as I always want to know what would happen next. They had me hooked. The cliffhanger that hit me the hardest was the stuff of nightmares. One thing I really liked though is that they mixed and matched some things from the comics and became original ideas in their own right. That even comic book fans didn't know where the story was going to go next. One example is what is now known as the famous adaptation. Stan the Man Lee and Avi Arad rewrote the origin of how Spider-Man got in contact with the Black Suit symbiote. In the comics, Spidey got in contact with the symbiote in Secret Wars, but they were going to go that cosmic early on. I don't know how those two came up with the idea, but they rewrote it. how it came to Earth, and being discovered by John Jameson. But the rest of the story pretty much remains the same.
What a nightmare! For a second, I thought I was going out of my mind.
It's such a good and thought out change that most future adaptations, including some of the movies, use this for how Peter found the suit. The Spider-Man 3 movie from Sam Raimi and the show Spectacular Spider-Man are very good examples. It also paved the way for one of Spidey's coolest villains, and later on anti-hero, your favorite and mine, Venom!
Spider-Man, enjoy your fame while it lasts.
Give me a hell yeah!
The 90s cartoon is probably the most quotable of anything Spider-Man, whether it be comics, cartoons, or movies. I really like the show's writing and what it was going for. Sometimes the writing though can be a little bit cheesy, but the best kind of cheese. My favorite's Gouda.
Monterey Jack.
Love going smoked Gouda.
Love me some fresh truffle based Swiss.
Love going 7-herb probiotic provolone.
Who doesn't love ripping Baby Bell?
The casting is spot on for every character in the show. With their vocal work, much like X-Men animated series, every time I read the comics, I always hear their voices. Christopher Daniel Barnes plays the voice of Spider-Man and Peter, and sometimes he's really good, and sometimes he's...
You can't escape me! I'll chase you to the ends of the earth!
Whoa, hold on, answer the question. Is it a date?
All right. You can call it a date if you want.
Great, I'll be there. I go to sleep for one lousy day and I wake up in the Twilight Zone.
Another cool fact, Stanley's wife, Joan Lee, plays Madam Web. And she's a perfect casting. I would think she would have been a really good live-action Madam Web, sadly, if she lived long enough. This role is just better suited for her than the role they gave her for the 90s Fantastic Four cartoon. She fits the character of Madam Web like a glove.
Like a glove.
Also, the art style in the show is very awesome, especially what they did with the Black Suit Spider-Man costume. I just love the way they did the shading on Black Suit Spider-Man and Venom. It's just a really neat visual. This was also one of the first Marvel shows to use CGI. But luckily not the character models, just the buildings and some other things. It's honestly not too distracting and it blends well into the series. Another really cool aspect is the spider sense. The colors blare when it happens. I do wonder though sometimes, what is that background when the spider sense happens?
My spider sense.
I don't know, maybe it's his fears he has that lies back inside of his mind. While there are a lot of villains with great backstories and sometimes good motivation, my favorites are Kingpin, Green Goblin, Hobgoblin, Dr. Octopus, and Venom. The Kingpin is the most developed, and is the villain that has committed the most crimes in the series to get where he is, even if it means a number of people had to be the fall guy for him to climb higher. The Hobgoblin, though, has only popped up a couple times in the series, but he is a complete wild card in every story he shows up in. A Joker, if you will, which does make sense since he is played by Mark Hamill.
How he handles defeat. So, let's see how you handle yours.
I'm free to go?
Free? Nothing with me is ever free. You're mine now. And so is all of this.
The Green Goblin, funnily enough, came after the Hobgoblin, when in the comics, well, it's the opposite. Besides maybe one other villain, the Green Goblin has probably done the most damage to Spidey, and his life as Peter. And when he's Norman Osborn, he's not as bad as he is in the comics, but he's still not totally in the clear either. He's not like the other versions where he's usually the main bad guy. The last main villain I want to talk about is one Spider-Man kinda accidentally created. And as I said before, he is one of my all-time favorites. When old Eddie Brock and the symbiote merge, they become Venom. A villain that knows that Spider-Man is Peter Parker and he can expose him any second. But he decides not to because he wants to psychologically torture Spider-Man.
You'll see us everywhere, even in your nightmares.
To an extent, he's probably the most ruthless villain out of the four that I talked about. One of the few things that doesn't hold up as well is the animation. The hand-to-hand combat sometimes wasn't the best thing about the series. Let's just say the action could have been a little bit better. And on top of that, this is one of the few 90s Marvel animated shows that recycle animation sometimes. Season 1 didn't really do that too much. In fact, it was minimal. But future seasons recycled animation from previous episodes. Back in the 60s, the old Spider-Man cartoon would do that. But that show did make great memes.
See? I told you! Now capture him! Which one? I don't care which one! Get them both! That man's an imposter! That man is the imposter!
Besides that, you would get animation errors here and there, but that was kind of normal for 90s cartoons. The soundtrack's pretty good, and it gets stuck in my head sometimes, even as an adult. This show at the time, like many others in the 90s, did have censorship issues. Like, they could never use real guns, always laser gun blasters. They did have real guns though in flashbacks, and Robbie even had one locked away. Another weird thing that censorship made them do is Spider-Man wasn't allowed to punch, he could only kick, which is okay?
Kinda makes a fellow wonder.
And I won't forgive them for changing the Sinister Six's name to the Insidious Six. I think I read the reason they changed it is because the people that were creating the show thought Sinister seemed too menacing for children. Like, really? Oh boy, when I was a kid, I would have definitely had nightmares hearing about the Sinister Six. And that doesn't really make sense. They had the freaking Punisher and Carnage! Like, of all the characters they chose, but they still managed to capture the core aspects of them. They were pretty badass, and my first introduction to Punisher and Carnage was from the show, so I can thank them for that. And toning these characters down just right takes a hell of a lot of talent, because these characters really are not meant for children. They're in the TMA territory. So while it kind of balances out, I still can't let this bullshit censorship slide. Especially if it hinders the entertainment aspect of this series. Another thing is the pacing. The pacing is really fast. It doesn't let up for most episodes. It keeps moving without slowing down, and when I was a kid, I had a hard time digesting what was going on. Not saying that's always a bad thing though, but it was kind of hard to keep up with sometimes with everything going so fast. This one though isn't really on the writers, it's more on the directors of the episodes. And after season 2, maybe season 3, I feel like Peter should have maybe graduated from college. Or at the very least dropped out like he did in the comics. Because at the end of season 3, I feel like that was the last time his college life mattered at all, really. Out of the 5 seasons, my favorite was season 3. It has pretty much a little bit of everything. Some of my favorite standalone episodes. Some of my favorite villains are introduced. It has my absolute favorite season finale out of the 5, and some of my favorite crossover episodes.
Ready for some father-son quality time? Between the two of us, there won't be enough left of Spider-Man to fit in a matchbox, but we'll try, won't we?
A lot of Marvel heroes have crossed over Spider-Man, and I mean a lot. Some with their own shows, and some that have yet to get their own shows, and some that have appeared in a lot of other Marvel shows. And here's some of my favorites.
Man. Pam, hold my calls for a while. I think I've finally gone crazy.
Throughout the 5 seasons, Peter has dealt with a lot. And to know the show ends before his journey's all completed, well, it really sucks. Although he didn't complete his journey, he did complete his character arc somewhat. The last piece of Peter Parker's character development has always brought a tear to my eye. In fact, makes me even cry a little bit.
For once, I like my life. I like myself. And for the first time ever, I wouldn't want to change anything about me.
Gee, you're definitely not the same guy I've been writing about all these years.
Well, Stan, we all have to grow up sometime, I suppose. even us characters of fiction.
With as good as this show is, you're probably wondering why did it get canceled? Who did it, and who's at fault? Oh my god, it's Avi Arad! Oh, Avi Arad, who else would it be? The show was going to get renewed for a 6th and possibly final season. But while in production of season 5, Avi Arad and Margaret Loesch, head of Fox Kids, got into a stupid argument. About what? I have no freaking clue. But the argument ended with the series being canceled. Thanks a lot, Avi. Thanks for nothing, douchebag. I give Spider-Man animated series from the 90s a very high recommendation. I suggest, if you're interested, to go find and watch it. It's still available on Disney Plus, I believe. Thank you all for watching.
Until next time, true believers, Excelsior!
Hello, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button and the like button, and possibly press on the bell icon, because YouTube doesn't like to tell you when I put up new videos. But if you just ignore me, I will get very angry. I'll find you and eat your brain.